The fluorescent lights of the diner hummed their tired song above me, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even the chrome counters look jaundiced. My feet ached, the kind of deep, bone-tired ache that comes from standing for 12 hours straight in shoes held together more by hope than stitching. I could feel every crack in the worn linoleum through the paper-thin soles as I wiped down table 7 for what felt like the 100th time that night. The smell of burnt coffee and grease had seeped so deeply into my uniform that I couldn't remember what my own scent was anymore, just synthetic vanilla air freshener, fighting a losing battle against decades of fried food, the sharp tang of industrial cleaner, and the particular staleness that clings to places that never close, never rest, never let their workers rest either. "Emma, table 12 needs refills." Gary's voice cut through my exhaustion, and I nodded automatically, grabbing the coffee pot with hands that had long since stopped feeling the heat through the handle. 3 a.m. The dead hour. The hour when the city held its breath between the drunks stumbling home and the early risers heading to work. The hour when I felt most invisible, most forgotten, just another shadow moving through shadows. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket as I poured coffee for a trucker who didn't look up, didn't say thank you, didn't see me at all. I was a ghost in a grease-stained uniform. And that was fine. Being invisible meant being safe. Being overlooked meant being left alone. But invisibility didn't pay the bills. I pulled out my phone in the back room during my break, slumping against the wall beside boxes of paper napkins and industrial-sized ketchup containers. My daughter's face smiled up at me from my lock screen. Lily, 5 years old, gap-toothed and perfect, staying with my mother tonight like she did every night I worked the graveyard shift. The text from my ex, Marcus, glared up at me. "Can't make the child support this month. Got some debts to handle. You understand?" I didn't understand. I never understood how a man could create a life and then treat that responsibility like an optional subscription he could cancel when inconvenient. But anger was a luxury I couldn't afford, and tears had stopped coming months ago. My finger hovered over his contact. I wanted to scream at him, to demand he be a father, to tell him that our daughter asked about him every single day. Instead, I found myself typing something else entirely, something I'd never had the courage to say to his face. "Baby, I need you tonight. I can't do this alone anymore, please." My thumb trembled over the send button. Pathetic. Desperate. Everything I'd sworn I'd never be again after he left. But exhaustion makes you stupid. Makes you reach for things you know will only hurt you more. I pressed send. The whoosh of the message leaving made my stomach drop immediately. Regret flooded through me, hot and nauseating. I stared at the screen, watching the message show as delivered, then read. But something was wrong. The contact name at the top of the conversation wasn't Marcus, it was Emma Valentino. My blood turned to ice. Valentino. The customer from last week. The man in the expensive black suit who'd left a $100 tip on a $12 check, and whose business card I'd saved in my phone because you didn't throw away opportunities, even when they came from men whose eyes held secrets dark enough to drown in. No, 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 no. The words tumbled out in a desperate whisper as my shaking fingers tried to unsend, to delete, to undo what I'd just done. But the message sat there, taunting me with its permanence. Read. Seen. Irreversible. 3 dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. He was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. The back room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the smell of grease and desperation suffocating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at those 3 dots that pulsed like a countdown to disaster. The dots disappeared, then reappeared, then disappeared again. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. What had I done? Men like Monsieur Valentino, men who wore suits that cost more than my yearly salary, who moved through the world like they owned it, who left tips that made my manager's eyes bulge. Those men didn't receive desperate, vulnerable texts from broke waitresses at 3 a.m. Those men didn't respond to weakness with kindness. The phone buzzed in my palm, and I almost screamed. Address. Just one word. A command, not a question. No punctuation, no warmth, just stark expectation typed in a way that suggested he was used to being obeyed without explanation. My fingers froze. Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, to block the number, to pretend this never happened. I could claim it was a joke, a wrong number, anything but the truth of my pathetic desperation laid bare. But another part of me, the part that was drowning in bills and exhaustion and the crushing weight of doing everything alone, that part whispered dangerous possibilities. Before I could stop myself, before logic could override the reckless surrender of someone who had nothing left to lose, I typed my address. Another whoosh. Another irreversible choice. 30 minutes. The reply came instantly, and with it, a strange calm settled over me. I'd stepped off the cliff. There was no point in screaming during the fall. I told Gary I had a family emergency, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into the November cold. The night air bit at my exposed skin, turning my breath to fog. But I barely felt it. My mind was too full of questions, of fears, of the terrible anticipation that comes from not knowing if you've just made the best or worst decision of your life. The walk home took 15 minutes. My apartment building looked even more depressing than usual. Crumbling brick, flickering hallway lights, the permanent smell of mildew and other people's cooking. I climbed the 3 flights to my door with leaden feet, each step feeling like walking toward either salvation or damnation. I didn't know which I hoped for more. Inside, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, hair escaping from my ponytail, uniform wrinkled and stained. I looked like what I was, tired, desperate, barely holding on. There was no time to change, no point in pretending to be anything other than what he'd see anyway. 28 minutes had passed when I heard the sound of a car engine outside. Not the usual backfiring, wheezing sounds of the neighborhood vehicles, but something smooth, powerful, expensive. I moved to the window, pulling back the faded curtain just enough to peer down at the street. A black SUV idled at the curb, windows tinted so dark they reflected nothing but the streetlight's orange glow. As I watched, a second SUV pulled up behind it, identical in every way except for the quiet menace it exuded. The back door of the first vehicle opened. A man stepped out, and even from 3 stories up, even in the dim light, I could see that he didn't belong in this neighborhood. His long black coat moved like liquid shadow, and even the way he stood, utterly still, utterly aware, spoke of controlled violence and absolute authority. 2 more men emerged from the second SUV, flanking positions, hands hidden in their coats in a way that made my mouth go dry. Then he looked up, directly at my window, directly at me. I stumbled back from the curtain, heart in my throat, but it was too late. He'd seen me. And now he was moving toward the building entrance with the fluid grace of a predator who'd already decided his prey wasn't going to run. My phone buzzed. Open the door. I stood frozen in the center of my tiny living room, surrounded by Lily's scattered toys and my secondhand furniture, listening to the sound of footsteps climbing stairs, getting closer, closer, until they stopped right outside my door. A knock. Not aggressive, not impatient. Just 3 measured raps that somehow conveyed more threat than any amount of pounding could have. My hand reached for the doorknob before my brain could override it. Some part of me, maybe the part that had already surrendered, already fallen, needed to see what happened next. I opened the door. Monsieur Valentino stood in the hallway, and up close, he was devastating. Not handsome in any conventional sense. His features were too sharp, too severe, carved from something harder than flesh. His jaw was defined in a way that suggested clenching, control, barely contained force. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. But his eyes, God, his eyes, they were the color of smoke and steel, cold and assessing, taking in every detail of me, my apartment, my life in a single sweeping glance that felt like being X-rayed, stripped, seen in a way I'd never been seen before. The scent hit me then, expensive cologne underlaid with something darker, something like gunpowder and cedar and power. It filled the doorway, filled my lungs, made my head spin. Behind him in the hallway, I could see the 2 men from the SUV taking positions at either end of the corridor. Guards, protection, or perhaps just witnesses to whatever was about to happen. "You're going to invite me in, Emma." His voice matched everything else about him. Low, controlled, with an accent I couldn't quite place, Italian maybe, Russian. Something that came from money and violence in equal measure. He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. How did you invite me in? Not a request. A command delivered with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been refused anything in his life. I stepped back, and he moved forward, entering my space, my home, my life with the inevitability of a storm that had been building on the horizon for weeks. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound felt like a prison door locking. Or maybe it sounded like freedom. He didn't sit, didn't ask permission to look around. Just moved through my living room like he was cataloging everything, the water stain on the ceiling, the duct tape holding together the corner of the couch, Lily's pink backpack hanging on a hook by the door with a unicorn keychain dangling from it. His gaze lingered on that backpack for a moment too long, and something shifted in his expression. Not softening. Men like him didn't soften, but a recalibration, like he was adjusting some internal equation I didn't understand. You have a daughter. Not a question. Yes. My voice came out smaller than I intended, and I hated myself for it. I straightened my spine, forced myself to meet those steel-gray eyes. She's with my mother tonight. He nodded once, as if confirming something he already knew. Of course he already knew. Men who traveled with armed escorts didn't walk into situations blind. The text, he said, turning to face me fully. The space between us felt charged. Dangerous, like the air before lightning strikes. It wasn't meant for me. No. There was no point in lying. It was meant for my ex, Marcus. I stopped, swallowing hard against the humiliation rising in my throat. I made a mistake. You saved my contact as M. Valentino. He took a step closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. Why? You left me your card, last week at the diner. You said if I ever needed anything, I meant if you needed a job, Emma. A real job. Another step. He was close enough now that I could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Not whatever desperation made you send that text to a man who clearly doesn't deserve it. The unexpected gentleness in his voice, or maybe not gentleness but something adjacent to it, made my eyes burn. I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who somehow felt like the most dangerous person I'd ever met. I know it was stupid, I whispered. I know I shouldn't have. Show me your phone. I blinked. What? Your phone. Show me the messages with him, with Marcus. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to maintain some shred of dignity, some boundary between my catastrophic personal life and this man who radiated controlled violence. But those eyes, they weren't cruel. They were calculating, yes, and cold. But beneath that ice was something that looked almost like fury. Not at me. For me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and opened the messages with Marcus. Months of ignored requests, broken promises, excuses that grew more elaborate and less convincing with each iteration. I handed it to Monsieur Valentino, watching his face as he scrolled through my humiliation, my desperation, my pathetic attempts to make a deadbeat father care about his own child. His jaw tightened with each message. The muscle there jumped, flexed, like he was physically restraining himself from something violent. He owes you money. Still not a question. Child support. But it's fine. I can... How much? It doesn't matter. How much, Emma? His voice dropped lower, took on an edge that made my stomach flip. Command and promise wrapped together in 3 words. $4,200. But really, I shouldn't have... He pulled out his own phone, typed something with quick, efficient movements, then pocketed it again. Less than 30 seconds. Whatever he'd just done, it was already in motion. You'll have it by morning. I stared at him. I can't accept... You're not accepting anything. He's paying what he owes you. Monsieur Valentino handed my phone back, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment. Even that brief contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. Plus interest for making you beg. How are you going to... I stopped, because suddenly I understood the way he moved, the guards outside, the absolute certainty in his voice when he made promises. Oh God, You're going to hurt him. I'm going to have a conversation with him about responsibility. He said it so calmly, like discussing the weather, about what happens to men who abandon their children and ignore their obligations. I should have been horrified, should have told him no, told him to leave, called the police. But instead, a dark satisfaction unfurled in my chest, warm and terrible and shamefully sweet. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why do you care? You don't even know me. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those smoke-colored eyes that seemed to see everything I was trying to hide. Finally, he reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm against my temple, surprisingly gentle for hands that I suspected had done terrible things. My father walked out when I was 6, he said quietly. Left my mother with nothing. 3 kids, no money, no options. I watched her destroy herself, trying to keep us fed, keep us alive. His hand dropped, but his eyes held mine captive. I watched her become invisible, just like you're trying to be. And I swore that when I had power, when I had resources, I would never let another woman suffer that way if I could prevent it. The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, had just shown me a wound I suspected he rarely acknowledged. I'm sorry, I whispered, about your mother. Don't be sorry. Be smart. He stepped back, putting professional distance between us again. But something had changed. Some barrier had cracked. The job offer is still open. I own several legitimate businesses. Restaurants, a hotel, a security company. You're clearly intelligent, hardworking. You deserve better than this. He gestured around my apartment, but there was no judgment in the movement. Just stating facts. What kind of work? Suspicion crept into my voice despite myself. I won't do anything illegal. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I'm not asking you to. I need someone to manage the front office at my security company. Answer phones, schedule appointments, handle basic bookkeeping. Standard office work. $25 an hour. Health insurance, daycare assistance. $25 an hour. I was making $9.50 at the diner. That's too much, I heard myself say. For office work. That's what competent work is worth. What you're making now is exploitation. He pulled out another business card, this one cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering. Think about it. But Emma? Yes? Don't send desperate texts to men who don't deserve them. And don't work yourself to death for people who see you as disposable. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at me over his shoulder. You're not invisible, not to me. Then he was gone, leaving only the scent of expensive cologne and the business card burning a hole in my palm. I stood frozen in my living room for what might have been minutes or hours, my mind spinning. What had just happened? A mafia boss, because that's what he clearly was, despite the talk of legitimate businesses, had just offered me a job, had just promised to collect money from my ex, had just looked at me like I was something worth seeing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus. I'll have the money to you by 9 a.m. All of it. I'm sorry for being a deadbeat. That won't happen again. I read it 3 times, trying to reconcile the terrified, formal tone with the Marcus I knew, the one who couldn't be bothered to respond to texts about his daughter's birthday or school events. Another text from Monsieur Valentino's number. Sleep well, Emma. We'll discuss the job tomorrow. I didn't sleep. How could I? Instead, I lay in my creaky bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to understand what force I'd just invited into my life. Because that's what he was, a force. Inevitable, powerful, dangerous. And I was terrified by how much I wanted to surrender to it. Morning came gray and cold. I'd maybe dozed for an hour, my dreams full of smoke-colored eyes and the scent of cedar and gunpowder. At 8:47 a.m., my phone dinged with a notification from my bank app. Deposit, $40,200. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. He'd actually done it. However he'd done it, and I didn't want to know the details, he'd made Marcus pay. At 9:15, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man in a black suit. Not MC Valentino, but clearly one of his people. He handed me an envelope. Mr. Valentino asked me to deliver this. Inside was a contract for employment at Valentino Security Solutions, along with a note in sharp, angular handwriting. Start Monday, 9 a.m. Address below. Bring your daughter if childcare falls through. We have an on-site daycare, MV. The man was still waiting, so I looked up at him. I haven't agreed to anything yet. Mr. Valentino said you would say that. He pulled out a phone, pressed a button, and handed it to me. Emma. That voice, even through the phone, made my pulse jump. Before you refuse, go to your building's front door. Look outside. Suspicious, I walked down the 3 flights of stairs with the suited man following at a respectful distance. I opened the front door and froze. A black sedan sat at the curb. Nice, but not ostentatious. And standing next to it, looking up at my building with an expression I'd never seen before, was Marcus. He looked terrified, but more than that, he looked like he'd seen God, or maybe the devil, and learned fear for the first time in his life. When he saw me, he actually flinched. Emma! He rushed forward, stopping a careful distance away like he was afraid to get too close. I'm so sorry. For everything. I've been a terrible father, a terrible person. I'm going to do better. I swear I'm going to do better. I'll have the support payments on time from now on. Every month, and I'd like to see Lily if you'll let me. Supervised, whatever you want. I'm so sorry. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. Imagine Marcus finally taking responsibility, finally apologizing, finally being the father our daughter deserved. I'd imagined feeling vindicated, triumphant, relieved. But standing there, looking at his pale face and shaking hands, all I felt was cold certainty. This wasn't genuine remorse. This was terror. Monsieur Valentino had put the fear of God, or the fear of himself, into Marcus so thoroughly that my ex had transformed overnight into a model of parental responsibility. I should have been disgusted, should have sent Marcus away, rejected this forced redemption. Instead, I thought of Lily, of her asking where her daddy was, why he didn't want to see her, if she'd done something wrong to make him leave. Supervised visits, I heard myself say, once a week to start, through my mother's house. And if you miss one payment, one visit, one chance to be there for her, you'll never see her again. Understand? Yes, I understand. Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. I turned and walked back inside without another word, the suited man following. At the top of the stairs, he handed the phone back to me. Did you see? Monsieur Valentino's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I saw. And the job? I closed my eyes, standing in the dingy hallway of my apartment building, holding a phone connected to a man who could apparently reshape reality with a few orders, a man who'd looked at my broken life and decided to fix it without asking permission, a man who made me feel seen for the first time in years. I'll start Monday, I whispered. Good. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. I'll send a car for you, 8:30. I can take the bus. Emma. Just my name, said in that tone that brooked no argument. Let me take care of you, please. And there it was. The truth beneath everything else. This wasn't just about a job, wasn't just about helping a struggling single mother. This was about possession. He'd decided I was his to protect, his to provide for, his to keep. And God help me, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop him. The weekend passed in a strange fog of anticipation and dread. I told my mother about the new job, carefully editing out any details about how I'd obtained it, and watched her face light up with relief she tried to hide. Lily was ecstatic about the new office with the daycare, even though I hadn't committed to using it yet. But Saturday night, alone in my bed after tucking Lily in, I let myself Google M. Valentino. I shouldn't have. Ignorance might have been safer, might have let me pretend this was just a generous businessman with a soft spot for struggling mothers, but I needed to know what I was walking into. The search results painted a picture that made my blood run cold and hot simultaneously. Matteo Valentino, 34 years old, owner of multiple legitimate businesses across the city. But beneath the carefully curated public image, there were whispers, rumors, carefully worded news articles about alleged organized crime connections, and under investigation, and no charges filed. There were photos, too. Him in expensive suits at charity galas, always with a beautiful woman on his arm who looked temporary, disposable. Him leaving courthouses with lawyers flanking him like guard dogs. Him at a restaurant opening, cutting a ribbon while men in dark suits watched the crowd with predatory awareness. In every photo, his eyes held that same cold calculation I'd seen in my apartment. The eyes of a man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, even if the tax return said otherwise. I should have been terrified. I was terrified, but I was also exhilarated in a way that made me hate myself a little. Monday morning arrived too quickly. At 8:25, I stood at my apartment window in my best outfit. A simple gray dress that I'd bought at a thrift store 2 years ago, cleaned and pressed until it looked almost professional. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Minimal makeup because I didn't own much and never learned how to apply it properly. I looked like exactly what I was. A woman trying desperately to appear like she belonged in a world she'd never been invited into. The black sedan pulled up at exactly 8:30. Not the SUVs from before, but something sleeker, more subtle. A man in a dark suit, not the same one from before, stepped out and looked up at my building. My phone buzzed. He's here. MV. I kissed Lily goodbye, reminded my mother about pickup times from kindergarten, and walked down those 3 flights for what felt like the last time as the person I used to be. The driver opened the back door without a word. The interior was leather and new car smell and a level of luxury I'd only seen in movies. I slid in, feeling like an imposter. My thrift store dress suddenly shabby against such opulence. We drove through the city in silence, leaving my crumbling neighborhood behind, passing through commercial districts until we reached an area I recognized from window shopping on my rare days off. The business district, where buildings were glass and steel and ambition. The car pulled up to a modern office building, all sharp angles and tinted windows. Valentino's Security Solutions was etched in brushed metal letters near the entrance. The driver opened my door, 10th floor. Mr. Valentino is expecting you. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, forcing me to confront my reflection from every angle. I looked small, uncertain, terrified. I forced my spine straight, my chin up. Whatever this was, whatever I'd agreed to, I would face it with whatever dignity I could manufacture. The 10th floor opened into a reception area that took my breath away. Modern furniture in black and cream, artwork that looked original and expensive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and behind a curved desk that probably cost more than my yearly rent sat a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and sharp eyes. Emma Reeves. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Assessment, calculation. I'm Patricia. I'll be training you for the next 2 weeks. Mr. Valentino is in a meeting but asked that you wait in his office. His office. Of course. Patricia led me down a hallway lined with doors marked conference room, file storage, security. Everything looked legitimate, professional, exactly like a security company should look. But I could feel the undercurrent. The way every person we passed looked at me with knowing eyes, the way Patricia's smile held secrets, the way the whole place hummed with something darker beneath its polished surface. She opened a door at the end of the hall, and I stepped into Matteo Valentino's private domain. The office was enormous, probably bigger than my entire apartment. One wall was entirely windows, offering a view of the city that made me dizzy. The others held bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, artwork that looked Renaissance era, a bar cart with crystal decanters filled with amber liquid, and behind a massive mahogany desk sat the man himself. He looked up from his computer as I entered, and something shifted in his expression. Softened, maybe, or perhaps just focused entirely on me in a way that made breathing difficult. Emma. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. Today he wore charcoal gray, the fabric draping perfectly over his broad shoulders. Thank you, Patricia. I'll handle her orientation from here. Patricia's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she nodded and left, closing the door with a soft click that sounded far too final. We were alone. "You came." He said it with satisfaction, like there'd been doubt. "You sent a car, and a contract with a salary I can't refuse." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Not much of a choice." "There's always a choice, Emma." He moved around the desk, each step measured, controlled. "You could have stayed at the diner, could have struggled and stayed invisible and safe." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell that cedar and gunpowder scent again. "But you're here. Why?" The honest answer was too dangerous, too revealing, so I gave him a partial truth instead. "Because my daughter deserves better than what I could give her on a waitress's salary." "And?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. "And because you saw me." The words escaped before I could stop them. Raw and vulnerable, and true. Nobody has really seen me in years. I've been invisible, disposable, barely surviving, but you looked at me like I mattered. The air between us crackled with tension so thick I could taste it. Metallic and dangerous and intoxicating. "You do matter." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my face with one hand. His palm was warm, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "More than you know. More than is probably wise. I don't understand." My voice came out breathy, uncertain. "You don't know me. One desperate text and you've changed my entire life." "Why?" His jaw tightened, that muscle jumping again. For a long moment, he just looked at me, those smoke-colored eyes burning with something I couldn't name. "Because when I saw you at that diner," he said quietly, "working yourself to exhaustion, invisible to everyone around you, I saw my mother. I saw every woman who's been ground down by life and men who didn't deserve them. I saw someone who deserved protecting." His thumb traced my lower lip, and my breath caught. "And then you sent that text, so desperate and vulnerable and honest, and I knew I couldn't let you drown. I wouldn't." "So this is charity?" I tried to sound offended, but it came out weak. "No, Emma, this is far more selfish than that." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my face. "This is possession. This is me deciding you're mine to protect, mine to provide for. Mine." I should have been terrified, should have run. Instead, I leaned into his touch like a starving thing finally being fed. "I'm not a possession," I whispered, even as everything in me screamed to surrender. "No, you're a person. A brilliant, strong, stubborn person who's been fighting alone for too long." His other hand came up to frame my face, holding me gently but firmly. "Let me fight for you. Let me give you what you need. Let me—" A knock at the door shattered the moment. Mateo stepped back smoothly, his expression shifting instantly to cool professionalism, though his eyes still burned. "Come in." A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek. He glanced at me briefly, then focused on Mateo. "We have a situation. The shipment. I'll handle it." Mateo's voice was cold now, businesslike. The gentleness from moments ago had vanished like it never existed. "Give me 10 minutes." The man nodded and left. Mateo turned back to me, and I saw the walls coming up, the professional distance reasserting itself. "Patricia will handle your training today. Learn the systems, the procedures. I'll check on you this afternoon." "What kind of situation?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "What shipment?" His expression darkened. "The kind you don't ask about if you want to keep working here. Understand?" It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like protection. Him trying to keep me separate from the darkness he operated in. "I understand." "Good." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Emma, don't go outside without security. Don't take public transportation home. The driver will be available whenever you need him." "Why? What's happening?" "Nothing you need to worry about. Just trust me. Please." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his enormous office, surrounded by luxury and books and artwork, feeling more confused and terrified and alive than I had in years. The rest of the day passed in a blur of training. Patricia was efficient, professional, and clearly had her own theories about why the boss had personally hired me. The work itself was straightforward: answering phones, scheduling appointments, managing files. Legitimate business for a security company that also provided private consultations and asset protection services. I didn't ask what those euphemisms meant. I didn't want to know. But I noticed things. The way everyone deferred to Matteo when he passed through the office, not with employee respect, but with something closer to fear. The way conversations stopped when I entered rooms. The way security cameras covered every angle, every entrance, every blind spot. This wasn't just a security company. It was a fortress, and I was now inside its walls. At 4:30, Patricia informed me I was done for the day. "Your driver is waiting downstairs. Same time tomorrow." I gathered my purse, my sad, worn purse that looked ridiculous in these surroundings, and headed for the elevator. But before I reached it, a hand caught my elbow. Matteo. He'd appeared from nowhere, silent as smoke. "How was your first day?" He guided me into the elevator, pressing the button for the parking garage rather than the lobby. "Overwhelming, but good." I glanced at him sideways. "Patricia thinks you're sleeping with me." "Patricia thinks I sleep with everyone." He said it without concern. "Let her think what she wants. Your performance will prove otherwise." The elevator descended into the underground garage, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. When the doors opened, I expected to see my driver. Instead, I saw Matteo's black SUV, the same one from that first night, flanked by 2 others, and standing beside them were at least 6 men in dark suits, all watching the elevator with predatory alertness. "What's going on?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. A precaution. Matteo's hand moved to the small of my back, warm through the thin fabric of my dress. "There's been some tension with a rival organization. Until it's resolved, I'm personally ensuring you get home safely. You don't need to, Emma." He turned me to face him, hands on my shoulders. "Don't argue, please. Just let me do this." The raw need in his voice stopped my protest. This wasn't about control. This was about fear. His fear that something might happen to me. "Okay," I whispered. Relief flooded his face. He guided me to the SUV, his hand never leaving my back, his body positioned between me and... What? Threats I couldn't see? Dangers I didn't understand? The drive back to my neighborhood was silent except for the quiet hum of the engine. But I could feel Matteo's tension, the way his eyes constantly scanned the streets, the way his phone buzzed repeatedly with messages he ignored. When we pulled up to my building, he got out first, scanning the area before opening my door. All 6 security personnel had followed us, creating a perimeter that felt both protective and terrifying. "I'll walk you up," Matteo said. Not a request. We climbed the 3 flights in silence, his presence behind me solid and warm and overwhelming. At my door, I fumbled with my keys, hyper-aware of him watching me, of the guards stationed at the stairwell exits, of how drastically my world had changed in 72 hours. I got the door open and turned to say goodbye, but Matteo pushed past me into the apartment, checking rooms with quick efficiency: living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, making sure I was safe, that no one was hiding in shadows. Only then did he relax fractionally. "Tomorrow you're moving," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Here isn't safe. I'm moving you and your daughter to a secure location. You can't just..." "I can. I will. I won't risk you." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "I won't lose you before I even have you." And there it was. The truth laid bare. This wasn't protection. This was obsession. And I was falling into it like quicksand, terrifying and inevitable and impossible to escape. "Matteo," I whispered. "What have I gotten myself into?" He stepped closer, cupping my face with both hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Me, Emma, you've gotten yourself into me, and I don't let go of what's mine." Then he kissed me. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was possession and desperation and hunger all rolled into one devastating moment. His lips claimed mine with an intensity that stole my breath, his hands sliding from my face into my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the kiss. I gasped against his mouth, and he took the opportunity to taste me more thoroughly, his tongue sliding against mine in a way that made my knees weak. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained boundaries, kept this professional, protected myself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting a man who lived in violence and danger. Instead, I grabbed his suit jacket and pulled him closer. He groaned against my mouth, the sound raw and unguarded, and suddenly I was pressed against the door with his body pinning me there. I could feel every hard plane of him, the controlled strength in his frame, the barely restrained need that matched my own. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, vibrating against my hip. He ignored it, his kisses moving from my mouth to my jaw, down to my neck where he found the pulse point that made me whimper. "Matteo," I gasped. "Your phone?" "I don't care." His teeth grazed my throat, sending electricity shooting down my spine. "Let the world burn. Right now, there's only you." The phone kept buzzing, urgent, insistent, impossible to ignore. He pulled back with a vicious Italian curse, his breathing ragged, his eyes dark with frustrated desire. He yanked the phone from his pocket and answered with barely controlled fury. "What?" I couldn't hear the other side, but I watched his expression shift from desire to cold calculation in seconds. Whatever was being said, it was serious. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and looked at me with regret so profound it hurt. "I have to go." "But Emma..." "I know. Business." I tried to sound understanding, but disappointment flooded through me. "No, not just business." He cupped my face again, forcing me to look at him. "A problem I need to handle so you stay safe. So everyone I care about stays safe. Do you understand? This isn't me choosing work over you. This is me protecting you." "From what?" "From people who would use you against me if they knew..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "If they knew how much you've come to matter in 3 days. 3 days. That's all it had been. 72 hours since I'd sent that wrong text, and my entire world had been turned inside out by a man who kissed me like I was oxygen and looked at me like I was something precious and breakable. Be ready tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'm moving you and Lily to a secure apartment. Everything will be arranged." He kissed me again, hard and fast. "Don't argue, please." Then he was gone, taking his security team with him, leaving me alone in my apartment with kiss-swollen lips and a racing heart, and absolutely no idea how I'd fallen so hard, so fast, for a man who lived in shadows. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I packed. Not everything. Matteo had said he'd arrange everything, which probably meant my shabby belongings would be replaced with things that matched his standards. But I packed Lily's favorite toys, our photos, the few things that mattered beyond their monetary value. At midnight, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Emma Reeves?" A woman's voice, cold and amused. "You don't know me, but I know you. I know you're working for Matteo Valentino. I know you have a daughter named Lily, 5 years old, attends Riverside Elementary." My blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants you to deliver a message to your new employer. Tell him that Isabella Marchesi sends her regards. Tell him that everything he's trying to protect can be taken away. Tell him..." The line went dead. I sat frozen on my bed, phone trembling in my hand. Someone knew about Lily. Someone was threatening my daughter. I called Matteo without thinking, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely dial. He answered on the first ring. "Emma? What's wrong?" The words tumbled out. The call, the threat, the woman's name. By the time I finished, I was crying, panic clawing at my throat. "Listen to me very carefully." His voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Lock your door. Push furniture against it. Don't open it for anyone except me. I'm sending a team now. They'll be there in 5 minutes. When they knock, they'll say, 'Valentino sends his regards.' That's how you'll know they're mine. Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. "Is Lily with you?" "No, she's at my mother's. Give me the address. Now." I did, hating how my voice shook, hating the fear that had wrapped around my chest like a vice. "I'm sending people there too. Your mother and daughter will be brought to you within the hour." "Emma?" His voice softened slightly. "This is my fault. Isabella is..." She's someone from my past. Someone who wants to hurt me by hurting what's mine. But I swear on everything I have, nothing will happen to you or Lily. Do you believe me? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know anything anymore. 3 days ago, I was invisible. Now people are threatening my daughter because of you. Silence, heavy and weighted with guilt. I know, he finally said. I know, and I'm sorry. But Emma, it's too late to go back. Isabella knows about you now. The only way to keep you safe is to keep you close, to protect you properly. Will you trust me? Please? What choice did I have? I'd stepped into his world, and now my daughter was in danger because of it. Okay, I whispered. Good girl. My men are outside your building now. Let them in. I heard the knock. 3 measured raps, just like that first night. Valentino sends his regards. I opened the door to find 4 men in tactical gear, armed with very visible weapons. They swept through my apartment with military efficiency, checking every corner, every window, every possible entry point. Clear, the lead one said into his radio, then to me. Ma'am, we'll be stationed outside your door and at the building exits until Mr. Valentino arrives. Your mother and daughter are being picked up now. They're safe. I nodded, numb with shock and fear. True to his word, within an hour there was another knock. I looked through the peephole to see my mother holding Lily, both of them flanked by more men in dark suits. I threw open the door and pulled them inside, crushing Lily against me. Mommy! She squealed, delighted by the late-night adventure. We got to ride in a fancy car with nice men, and they said we're going to a new house. My mother's eyes were wide with fear and confusion. Emma, what is happening? Who are these people? They said you were in danger. I'll explain everything, I promised, though I barely understood it myself. I need you to trust me. We're safe now. Another knock. My heart jumped into my throat. It's me. Matteo's voice came through the door. I opened it to find him standing there in the same suit from earlier. But now it was rumpled, his tie loosened, a smear of something dark on his cuff that I desperately hoped wasn't blood. His eyes were wild, searching, and when they landed on me, they filled with such relief I felt it in my bones. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over me, checking for injuries. Then he knelt down to Lily's level, his expression softening in a way I'd never seen. Hello, Principessa, he said gently. I'm Matteo. I'm a friend of your mommy's. Lily studied him with 5-year-old directness. You're very tall, and you have sad eyes. Something cracked in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. I do have sad eyes sometimes. You're very observant. Mommy says I notice everything. She tilted her head. Are you the one keeping us safe from the bad people? Yes, sweetheart, I am. And I promise nothing bad will happen to you. Ever. The conviction in his voice, the fierce protectiveness, it should have terrified me. Instead, it made something deep in my chest ache. My mother was watching this interaction with wide eyes, clearly piecing together far too much. Emma, we need to talk. Privately, Matteo stood nodding. I'll stay with Lily. Emma, talk to your mother. But we leave in 20 minutes. Everything is ready. I led my mother into the bedroom, closing the door. Is he who I think he is? She hissed. Emma, please tell me you haven't gotten involved with Matteo Valentino. Please tell me you're not that foolish. You know who he is? Everyone knows who he is. He's dangerous, Emma. His family, they're criminals. Organized crime. The kind of people who disappear their problems. She grabbed my hands. What were you thinking? I was thinking that I was drowning. The words burst out of me, raw and angry. I was thinking that I couldn't pay rent. Couldn't feed my daughter properly. Couldn't keep working 16-hour days and still make ends meet. He offered me a way out, and I took it. And now someone is threatening Lily because of him. I know. Tears burned my eyes. I know, Mom. But I can't go back. It's too late. He's right. Now that they know about us, the only way to stay safe is to stay with him, under his protection. My mother's face crumpled. Oh, Emma, what have you done? What I had to do to survive, I whispered. What I had to do to give Lily a better life. But at what cost? I didn't have an answer for that. 20 minutes later, we were in Mateo's SUV, driving through the city toward an address I didn't recognize. Lily had fallen asleep in my lap, exhausted by the adventure. My mother sat stiffly beside me, radiating disapproval and fear. Mateo sat in the front passenger seat, his phone constantly buzzing with updates. I could hear fragments of his conversations, terse, cold, commanding. He was hunting Isabella Marchesi, I realized. Hunting whoever had dared to threaten us. We pulled up to a luxury high-rise in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. The building was all glass and steel, with a doorman and security desk, and the kind of elegance that made my thrift store dress feel even shabbier. Penthouse, Mateo said, guiding us to a private elevator that required a key card. 3 floors, full security system, panic room, guards stationed on the floor below. You'll be safe here. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, and I stopped breathing. It was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city, glittering like stars below us. Modern furniture in soft grays and creams, artwork on the walls, a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. And through an open doorway, I could see a bedroom with a princess castle bed already set up. For Lily. You did this today? I turned to Mateo, stunned. While handling whatever crisis pulled you away. You arranged all of this? I have people. He said it like it was nothing, like transforming an apartment into a home for a woman, and child he barely knew was just another task to delegate. The master bedroom is through there. Your mother can have the second bedroom. Lily's room has the castle bed and every toy I could think a 5-year-old might want. My mother was staring around in shock, her disapproval warring with stunned appreciation. This is too much, I managed. Mateo, I can't. You can. You will. He stepped closer, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining. Emma, I meant what I said. You're mine now. That means I take care of you. That means I give you everything you need, and most of what you want. That means you live somewhere safe and beautiful and worthy of you. I'm not worth this, I whispered. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. You're worth so much more. You just haven't seen it yet. But I see it, Emma. I see you. Behind us, my mother cleared her throat awkwardly. I'm going to put Lily to bed in her new room. Emma, we'll talk in the morning. She disappeared down the hallway, carrying my sleeping daughter, leaving me alone with Mateo in this impossible apartment that felt like a dream or a trap. I couldn't decide which. I need to go, he said quietly. Isabella is still out there, and I need to handle this personally. But I'll have guards here at all times. Don't leave the apartment without security. Don't open the door unless you're expecting someone specifically. And Emma? Yes? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I brought danger to your life. I'm sorry I pulled you into my world without warning you what that meant. But I'm not sorry I found you. I'm not sorry I want you, and I won't apologize for doing everything in my power to keep you safe. He kissed me then, softer than before, tinged with regret and promise and barely restrained need. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark with emotions I couldn't name. Sleep well, Bella. I'll see you tomorrow. Then he was gone, leaving me in a penthouse apartment that cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined. Trapped in a gilded cage by a man who terrified and captivated me in equal measure. I walked to the windows and looked out at the city below, glittering and beautiful and full of shadows, where men like Mateo operated. And I wondered if I'd been saved or captured, or if, maybe, they were the same thing. I didn't see Mateo for 3 days. 3 days of living in luxury that felt increasingly like a prison, no matter how beautiful the bars. 3 days of guards stationed outside our door, in the lobby, probably on the roof for all I knew. 3 days of my mother's worried glances and Lily's innocent questions about when Mr. Mateo with the sad eyes would visit again. 3 days of wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Patricia called on the second day to tell me to take the week off, that Mr. Valentino had situations to handle and wanted me to settle into the new apartment. Her tone suggested she knew exactly what kind of situations, and that I should be grateful to be kept separate from them. I was grateful, and terrified, and confused by how much I missed him. On the fourth morning, I woke to find my mother already up, coffee brewing, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows with an expression I couldn't read. "You love him," she said without turning around. "I barely know him." "That's not what I asked." She turned to face me, her eyes sad and knowing. "Emma, I see how you look at your phone every time it buzzes, hoping it's him. I see how you watch the door. I see you falling. And I'm terrified because men like him, they destroy everything they touch, even when they're trying to protect it. He saved us," I said quietly. "He gave us safety, security, a home. He made Marcus finally take responsibility. He put you in danger in the first place by claiming you as his." My mother's voice wasn't angry, just resigned. "That woman who called, who threatened Lily, she did it because you matter to him, because he made you a target by wanting you." The truth of it sat heavy in my chest. But so did another truth, one I'd been avoiding. "I know," I whispered, "but Mom, I was drowning before him, working myself to death, invisible, barely surviving. He makes me feel seen. He makes me feel like I matter, like I'm worth protecting. Is that so wrong?" "No, baby. It's not wrong. It's just dangerous." She crossed to me, pulling me into a hug. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself in him." I couldn't make that promise. I suspected I'd already started losing myself the moment I opened my door to him that first night. Late that afternoon, while Lily napped and my mother read in her room, the penthouse elevator chimed. My heart leaped into my throat. The guards would have announced to anyone coming up. Unless... The doors opened, and Matteo stepped out. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were shadowed, his jaw dark with stubble, his expression carved from exhaustion and something darker. When he saw me, everything in him seemed to collapse inward with relief. "Emma." Just my name, spoken like a prayer. "You look terrible," I said, which wasn't what I'd meant to say at all. I'd meant to demand answers, to ask about Isabella, to maintain some dignity and distance. Instead, I crossed to him, and he caught me in his arms, burying his face in my hair, breathing me in like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. "I'm sorry," he murmured against my temple. "I'm sorry I disappeared. I had to handle things. Had to make sure." He pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. "Isabella is gone. She won't be a threat anymore. You're safe now. Lily is safe." I didn't ask what gone meant. I didn't want to know the specifics of what he'd done to protect us. 3 days, I whispered. 3 days without a word. I know. I couldn't risk contacting you, couldn't risk anyone tracing communication back to you while I was handling things. But Emma, every second, you were all I thought about. Getting back to you. Making sure you were safe. Making sure... He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Making sure I didn't lose you before I even had you." "You don't have me," I said. But it came out weak, unconvincing. "Don't I?" His thumb traced my lower lip, his eyes dark with need and exhaustion and barely restrained hunger. "Then why does it feel like you're the only thing keeping me human? Like without you, I disappear completely into the darkness I operate in?" "Matteo, I love you." The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. "I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. I know I have no right, but I love you, Emma. I loved you from the moment you opened your door to me looking terrified and brave and so fucking beautiful I couldn't breathe. I love how you see me, really see me. Not the power or the money or the fear, but the man underneath who's just as lost and desperate as you were." Tears burned my eyes. "You can't love me. You don't even know me. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your daughter. I know you'd rather starve than ask for help. I know you sent a desperate text to the wrong person, and instead of being humiliated, you faced me with dignity and strength. I know you're terrified of me, but you let me in anyway. I know you taste like hope and feel like home." His forehead pressed against mine. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel this too." I couldn't. Because he wasn't wrong. In 4 days, this man had become gravity. The force that kept me grounded, and the thing that might destroy me if I got too close. "I feel it," I admitted, "and it terrifies me." "Good. Be terrified. Be smart. But Emma..." He kissed me softly, desperately. Don't run. Please don't run from this. From us. Mr. Mateo. We broke apart to find Lily standing in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her face lighting up when she saw him. You came back. Mommy said you were busy with important things, but I knew you'd come back. Mateo's expression transformed. All the cold, hard edges melting into something achingly gentle. He crouched down to her level. Of course I came back, Principessa. I made you a promise, didn't I? To keep you and your mommy safe. I always keep my promises. Can you stay for dinner? Grandma is making pasta, and Mommy says I can have 2 desserts because we're celebrating our new house. He glanced at me, question in his eyes. I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, kept him at arm's length until I understood what this was, what we were becoming. Instead, I nodded. Relief and joy flooded his face. Emotions I suspected he rarely let himself feel. I would love to stay for dinner. Dinner was surreal. Matteo Valentino, alleged crime boss, sitting at our table eating my mother's pasta, and listening to Lily's rambling stories about kindergarten with the patience of a saint. My mother watched him with wary assessment, clearly torn between maternal protectiveness and grudging appreciation for how gentle he was with Lily. And I watched him transform. The cold, controlled man who commanded fear and respect melted into someone softer, someone who laughed at Lily's jokes and complimented my mother's cooking, and looked at me across the table with eyes full of promises I wasn't sure I should believe. After dinner, he insisted on doing the dishes while my mother put Lily to bed. We stood side by side at the sink, this powerful, dangerous man with his sleeves rolled up, drying plates while I washed, in comfortable silence that felt more intimate than any kiss. Thank you, I said quietly. For dinner, for being gentle with her, for Emma. He set down the plate he was drying and turned to face me. You don't need to thank me for treating your daughter with kindness. She's incredible. Brave and bright, and so much like you, it hurts. She asked me yesterday if you were going to be her new daddy. The words escaped before I could stop them. Mateo went very still. What did you tell her? That you were my friend, that you were helping us, that... I stopped, swallowing hard. That I didn't know what you were to us yet. And now? He stepped closer, soap bubbles still clinging to my hands as he took them in his. Do you know now? I know that I'm falling for you, and it terrifies me. I know that you've turned my entire world upside down in less than a week. I know that you're dangerous and violent and everything I should run from. I looked up at him, letting him see everything I felt, and I know that I don't want to run. I want to fall, even if it destroys me. The kiss he gave me was different from the others. Slower, deeper, full of promise and possession, and the kind of desperate tenderness that comes from finally admitting the truth. When we broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I will never hurt you intentionally. I will protect you with everything I have. I will give you and Lily the life you deserve. But Emma, I need you to understand what choosing me means. Tell me. It means you'll always have guards. It means there will always be danger lurking at the edges. It means you can never be truly invisible again, because being mine makes you visible to everyone. My allies, my enemies, everyone. It means accepting that the man you love operates in darkness, even as he tries to keep you in the light. And if I can accept that? I asked. If I choose you anyway? His arms came around me, pulling me close, his face buried in my hair. Then I spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. I spend every day earning the gift of your trust. I become the man Lily thinks I am when she looks at me with those innocent eyes. Someone worth believing in. You already are, I whispered. You just don't see it yet. 3 months later, I stood in the same penthouse, but everything had changed. My mother had moved into a safer apartment nearby, one Mateo had arranged and refused to let her pay for. Marcus saw Lily every Saturday under supervised visitation, terrified into being the father he should have been from the start. And I had transformed from an invisible waitress into someone who managed Mateo's legitimate businesses with efficiency that surprised even Patricia. But more than that, I'd become his. Not in the possessive, controlling way I'd feared, in the way that mattered, the way of partnership, of being seen and valued and loved with an intensity that still took my breath away. He'd been right about the danger. There had been 2 more incidents, attempts by rivals to use me as leverage. Both had been handled swiftly, violently, and I'd learned not to ask for details. I lived in a strange duality now, managing spreadsheets and appointments by day, while armed guards ensured my safety, loving a man who was gentle with my daughter, but ruthless with his enemies. The elevator chimed, and Lily ran to greet Matteo as he emerged, squealing when he scooped her up and spun her around. "Mommy, Mr. Matteo brought flowers again. He always brings flowers on Fridays." He set her down and crossed to me, pressing a kiss to my temple as he handed me a bouquet of white roses, my favorite, which he'd learned within the first week. "How was your day, Bella?" His hand settled on my waist, warm and possessive and home. "Busy. The restaurant's quarterly reports need your signature, and Patricia says the hotel needs new security protocols installed. Later." He pulled me closer, his eyes soft in that way that was only for me and Lily. "Right now, I want to have dinner with my girls and pretend the world doesn't exist beyond these walls." "You know it does exist," I reminded him gently. "You can't hide from it forever." "No. But I can steal moments of peace with the woman I love, and the child who's become mine in every way that matters." He kissed me softly. "Let me have this, Emma. Let me have you." And I did. Because somewhere between that desperate text and this moment, I'd learned something crucial. Love isn't about finding someone safe. It's about finding someone worth the risk. Someone who sees your darkness and doesn't run. Someone who protects your light even as they operate in shadows. Matteo Valentino was dangerous. He was violent. He was everything I should have feared. But he was also the man who'd seen me when I was invisible, who'd given me safety when I was drowning, who looked at my daughter like she was precious, and at me like I was his salvation. And maybe that's what we were to each other. Salvation and damnation wrapped together so tightly, they became the same thing. That night, after Lily was asleep and the city glittered below us like fallen stars, Matteo pulled me onto the balcony. The November air was cold, but his arms were warm around me, his chin resting on top of my head as we looked out at the world we'd built together. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "That text? Everything that came after?" I thought about my tiny apartment, the graveyard shifts, the exhaustion and invisibility and desperation. I thought about the danger and the fear and the violence lurking at the edges of our beautiful life. Then I thought about Lily's laughter, my mother's relief, the way Matteo looked at me like I was his entire world, the way I'd learned to breathe again, to believe I deserved more, to understand that being seen, truly seen, was worth any risk. "No," I whispered, turning in his arms to look up at him. "I don't regret it. Not for a second." "Good." He kissed me slowly, thoroughly, with the kind of possessive tenderness that made my knees weak. "Because you're mine now, Emma Reeves. For as long as you'll have me, for as long as I'm breathing, longer if I can manage it." "That's a very long time," I teased, even as tears pricked my eyes. "Not nearly long enough." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "I love you. I will always love you. You and Lily. You're my family now, my home, the light in all my darkness." "I love you too," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "Even though you're terrifying and possessive and probably clinically obsessed with protecting me." "Definitely clinically obsessed." He grinned, rare and beautiful and devastating. "But you knew what you were getting into when you sent that text." "I sent it to the wrong person," I reminded him. "No, Bella." He pulled me closer, his lips brushing mine. "You sent it to exactly the right person. You just didn't know it yet." And as he kissed me under the stars, in a penthouse paid for by money I didn't ask about, surrounded by guards protecting us from threats I barely understood, I realized he was right. That desperate, vulnerable text had been meant for someone who didn't deserve it. Instead, it had found someone who did, someone who'd looked at my brokenness and decided to protect it, someone who'd seen my strength and decided to nurture it, someone who'd taken my desperation and transformed it into something beautiful and terrifying and real. I'd sent a text to the wrong person and found exactly who I needed. 6 months later, Lily stood in a flower girl dress, scattering rose petals down an aisle while my mother cried happy tears. And I walked toward a man who'd transformed from stranger to savior to soulmate, wearing a ring that caught the light and promised forever. "You look beautiful," Mateo whispered as I reached him, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You look happy," I whispered back. Like the sad eyes Lily noticed are finally smiling, because of you, because of her. Because you both taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing I have. He took my hands, his grip warm and steady and sure. "Ready to officially become mine? I've been yours since the moment you walked through my door," I admitted. "This is just making it official." And as we said our vows, surrounded by people who'd become family and guards who'd become friends, I thought about that desperate night 4 months ago. About exhaustion and invisibility, and a text sent to the wrong number. About how the worst mistakes sometimes lead to the best destinations. About how sometimes being saved and being captured are exactly the same thing. About how love, real, terrifying, all-consuming love, doesn't care about timing or logic or whether it makes sense. It just is. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.